All right, guys, welcome to another podcast. So, firstly, I just want to thank everyone that subscribed to this channel. Can't believe I hit 1,000 subscribers. I feel so popular. You guys making me feel so special and emotional over here. Yeah, but I mean, I started doing these videos about 3 weeks ago. Um, and to get to over 1,000 subscribers is a hell of a thing. So, thanks, guys. You really appreciate it. And let's see where this thing goes. If I get I don't know, a couple more thousand subscribers and people are tuning in a bit more, maybe I'll spend some of my hard-earned cash on some bells and whistles, get a nerd or something like that to do me some awesome videos. But obviously, for me, the content's always more important, right, than the bells and whistles. But bells and whistles would be nice. So let's just see where it goes. And again, thank you for everyone that subscribed and everyone that comments. It means a hell of a lot, and it's a lot of fun for me. And this is why I'm doing this whole thing. It's just a bit of fun. So what I'm going to discuss today is the Australian schoolboy debate. So obviously, there was a bit of controversy on my global top 20. I fully expected that. It's always going to be the case of school rankings. No one's ever going to agree. But some Aussies got really pissed off, and I don't blame them. I'd also be pretty pissed off if I didn't see one of my schools from my country in the top 20. And some Irish oaks complained as well. Some English guys complained as well. So, look, since I've done New Zealand already, I'm going to sort of explore each nation and sort of start the process with Australia. Now, I think it's best to show everyone my process and sort of understand where my thinking is. I'm not a guru, it's just my personal opinion. I think it's sound reasoning, but comments like typical South African, like from that prick school teacher, uh, going on there and saying, I don't know what I'm talking about, and this school's better and that school's better. I said, okay, send me some links, give me some facts, can't do it. And then some other guy saying Australian schools are the best in the world. No, they're not. Someone else saying the GPS is the strongest competition in the Southern Hemisphere. No, it's not. The Auckland League is a lot more competitive than the GPS. So, what I want is facts. I don't want opinions. So, let's just do this whole thing in the spirit of facts. Now, when you got data in front of you, at least it's something to start with, right? The end of the day, if we got data in front of us, I might interpret it differently to how you'd interpret it, but at the same time, at least we're starting from base reality, so to speak. So look, my first problem was access. Finding the rest of the country school results was very easy. Australia, not so much. From an outsider's perspective, guys, it's a very confusing structure to sort of understand. I mean, I just see acronyms everywhere. GPS, AA, GPS, IAS, I mean, you name it. The rest of the countries are just easy. And the other problem was there's no central database for results over the years, especially against overseas schools. And results against overseas schools sort of sets a benchmark, which brings me to my next problem, the overseas games. I've really looked everywhere to find these results. Very difficult. Came up with a few results, not many. Now, the thing is, seeing these overseas results helps set a benchmark, so to speak, and it goes a lot further than people think. So, for example, I can look at the result of an English school against a Kiwi school, and I can sort of gauge, relatively speaking, how strong the leagues are in each of those countries. So, let's say, for example, that Hastings plays Hartbury College at the Sanex Festival, and it's 20 points to 16 score. And then basically what happens is that Hartbury goes back to England and completely thrashes everyone, and and Hastings goes back and has a losing record for the season. Then you know that the New Zealand league is a hell of a lot more stronger than the English league, for example. Now, I want to get this out of the way because this is a comment that really pisses me off. Tours don't reflect strength. Bullshit. If you're missing star players or you're purposely leaving them out, or they've signed a rugby league contract, who cares? At the end of the day, the team that you put on the field is representative of your rugby, whether you like it or not. When you say all of this rubbish, all you're doing is saying, look, we don't have the depth. We got a whole team revolves around a couple of players. So I call bullshit on it. Anyway, so let's just take a look at some results versus South African schools. So in 92, Brisbane State beat Cairns 2013. And Cairns had a 7-6 season, 7 wins and 6 losses. They lost to Queens 44-5 that year, and Queens weren't even the best in the border state, never mind South Africa. And Brisbane State were the GPS champions that year, which is the Queensland League, and they produced one Australian schools players. So the so-called strongest league in the Southern Hemisphere, their champions managed to beat, a school that was very, very weak that year by 7 points. I just don't buy that this league is so strong. And then St. John's did a tour to Australia. Now, it is a tour to Australia and New Zealand, right? They got thrashed on all of their games in New Zealand. They lost all of their games, and then they beat the Australian teams comfortably. Now, these might not be big Australian teams, but at the same time, St. John's weren't a strong team that year. And then we got 95, Westville beating Oak Hill. Westville had a weak year, and Oak Hill didn't seem to be a powerhouse in Australian rugby. So that's pretty much moot, so to speak, isn't it? Now we get an interesting result in the year 2000. Kings beat Porus 28-5. Beat them very convincingly, and they won the Sanex title. They had 4 Australian schools players in their team that year. Now Porus had a very weak team that year, and I'm not just making excuses. They lost to Grey 42-13 that year. And they did however, have one SA schools players. So, look, Porus are a strong school, and they were well beaten. So, for example, in this year, Kings would have probably been in my top 10 or top 5, maybe. Who knows? And then we go to St. Joseph's Nudgee against Grey College. Grey thrashing them 34 points to 5. Now, St. Joseph's had 4 Australian schools players, and Grey only had 1. But Grey were ranked second in the country that year. And then we've got Downlands College. Sorry, let me just go back to the Aussies and Central Coast Union game. Aussies were number 1 that year. Great team. Thrashed this team. Never heard of them. Doesn't count. Very simple. 2008, St. Stithians beat Downlands 57-5. St. Stithians had a 5-win and 4-loss domestic record, far outside the top 50. I'm not too sure about. Look, the statistics aren't there for year by year for some of these Australian schools, but they claim to be one of the strongest sporting schools in Queensland, and Tim Horan comes from this school. So if they are a strong school, I'm hoping it was the second team that St. Stithians were playing, because that's a hell of a thrashing. And then in 2012, we got Monument beating St. Stanislas. Monument had a very poor season, 9 wins, 2 draws, and 10 losses. Not too sure about St. Stanislas, but at the same time, they don't seem to be a major rugby school in Australia. I mean, they lost to some school from Uruguay at the tournament, so not too much to read into that. And then 2013, we had Barker College doing a tour to South Africa. Unbeaten tour, and had 1 Australian schools player in their team. But look who they played. They played Strand. Strand play against very weak schools. They wouldn't be in the top 50. And Strand had a 12-win, 1-draw, and 8-loss season. Then Linkside. Why the hell they even playing Linkside if they're a strong Australian rugby school? Linkside lost 57-0 to Alexander Road. Alexander Road aren't, by any stretch of the imagination, a rugby school. Alexander Road lost 60-13 to Graham that year. And Graham aren't even the strongest team in their town. So, Barker's, from what I understand, is a pretty strong rugby school in Australia. They play in the AAGPS division in New South Wales. So, very disappointing to sort of see a result like that for a powerhouse team. If a powerhouse team from one of the strongest leagues in Australia is coming to South Africa, they should be playing maybe the southern suburb schools, or maybe some of the border schools, at least some competition. But Strand and Linkside, come on. And in 2013, St. Joseph's Nudgee played at the Sanex Festival. They had 6 Australian schools reps that year, and they were GPS champions. Now, they beat Daniel Pienaar 20 points to 7. And Daniel Pienaar had a 5-10 local season, 5 wins and 10 losses. Now, just to get perspective of how weak Daniel Pienaar were, They lost 39-8 to Grey PE. Grey PE lost to Grey Bloom 50-21. So if Grey College, Grey Bloom, had have played Daniel Pienaar, that would have probably been a 100-point game. And not only that, guys, they lost to St. Kitts from New Zealand 45 points to 7. And St. Kitts were ranked number 2 in New Zealand that year. So 6 Aussie schools reps, GPS champions, barely beat Daniel Pienaar and get thrashed by St. Kitts. Again, not very impressive. Then we get to 2014 where St. Edmunds played Paul Boys. Now that year St. Edmunds had one Australian schools player and were ACT champions. On their website, they claim to be a very, very strong rugby school. And apparently winning the most successful Waratah Cups. And they're not a weak rugby school. They've produced Matt Gitto, George Gregan, and Antti Farninga. So they're definitely not a weak school. And Paul Boys were ranked 11th in the country that year, had 0 SA schools players, and they thumped them 66-0. Now, you do get bad years, don't get me wrong, but even in a bad year, you don't lose 66-0 to a top school versus another top school. I mean, that's a joke. Then we get to Scots College. Look, the New South Wales combined teams, I'm going to pretty much skip over that, guys, as well as the Melbourne Grammar. I put those games in there just because I needed to fill up some space. But New South Wales combined aren't really, from what I understand, it's an association of different schools, but not the strongest schools in Australia. So it's not a fair reflection of the relative strength of the schoolboy rugby over there. So if I'm skipping over those, you can understand why. Anyway, so just back to it. Scots College did a 2014 tour to South Africa. Now, you can Google this. Phil Kearns in 2014 was complaining about their dominance. Like, they were just thrashing everybody. So they toured to South Africa. By the way, they were AAGPS champions that year, which is the New South Wales trophy. So they were a very strong team. They beat St. John's, who had an 8-win and 12-loss season outside the top 50. They beat Pretoria Boys, who had a 6-win and 14-loss season outside the top 50. And then they lost to Jeppe. Where do you think Jeppe were ranked in South Africa that year? Top 10? Nope. Top 20? Nope. Try number 36. So a school that's basically so dominant, Phil Kearns feels the need to say something, can't beat our number 36 ranked team. Crazy. Then another result to look at is Brisbane Boys against Porus. Now, that year they had 2 Australia schools players. They finished third in the GPS competition. 7 Queensland players altogether. But they were up against a great Porus team. I mean, they were ranked 4th in the country that year, and they had 3 players who played for Western Province and SA schools, including Damian Willemse. And Damian Willemse was possibly one of the best schoolboy rugby flowers I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, that guy's pure class. But 3rd place in GPS, which is supposed to be so competitive, playing against the 4th ranked team in South Africa, 35-3 is quite a significant score, guys. It's quite a significant score. And this year, the Cavaliers Academy come in. They lost to Boylan Landbou 67-0 and Monument 48-12. But there's something that needs to be understood about this academy team is that, from what I understand, they had a couple of junior international players. But at the same time, this squad had like 1 week or something like that to get together before the tournament. So playing in a foreign country, not having time to get together, definitely not a reflection of this, not a fair comparison, let's say it like that. So all in all, you got 10 wins for Australian schools and 19 wins for South African schools. But there's when I did the New Zealand analysis, there were results there where the best in South Africa could not beat the best in New Zealand. And even the best in South Africa couldn't beat the number 4, number 5 ranked team in New Zealand. all 10 of these wins are not impressive, except for the win against Port Royal. Otherwise, it's just a complete thrashing. Even if you take a look at the New South Wales game, New South Wales combined game of 2015, they played Grey second team, 55 points to 8. Melbourne Grammar come over, they play Wynberg's third team, they lose 28 points to 7. So again, this is my base. I mean, I did my research. When you start to look at this and start to look at the bigger picture, you see that the relative strength just isn't really there. And I couldn't find much on UK tours, but what I did find was King's Parramatta did the 2009 tour to the UK, and they had a tight win over Oakham. Now, Oakham had an 8 win, 1 draw, 6 loss season. And then they lost to Bromsgrove. Now, Bromsgrove had a 13 win and 4 loss season. So they weren't a weak team, but Bromsgrove barely beat Campion School. And Campion School, they beat them, Bromsgrove beat them 6-0. Now, that same team toured South Africa. They played 4 matches, they won 1 match, and they lost 3 matches. Their one win was against Haltmakar's second team. And they lost to some weak schools. But they also got thrashed 61-5 by Waterkloof. And Waterkloof were outside of the top 20 that year. I mean, it's quite a big difference there. Then in 2011, we got St. Joseph's Nudgee, and they beat Whitgift in a very, very close game. Whitgift had a 14 win, 1 draw, 5 loss season. And as a comparison, Whitgift had a draw with Wellington College, and Wellington College ended up losing to Bishops, and Bishops lost 43-15 to Port Royal. So you can see, once I have some results of a top school against a top school, or even an average school against a top school, whatever it is, as soon as I got a result from these schools playing each other across borders, I can start doing some comparisons to take a look at their relative strength. Now, those were 2 title-winning teams, Parramatta and Nudgee. And in my opinion, if Parramatta had come to South Africa in 2009 and play our top schools, or Nudgee had to do the same thing, I think it's Nudgee. Nudgee. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Sorry, guys. But yeah, even if St. Joseph's came to South Africa and they played Port Royal, it would probably be in a similar score. So, yeah, again, I'm just not that impressed. And if we take a look at Australia schools, like the international team, the international rep team, in 2013 is the only year that we can really compare our results against their results. And look at that. I mean, they were thrashed 23-3 by England, who we beat 19-14. They were thrashed by Wales 12-26, who we beat 14-13. So, mind the gap. I mean, it's what all the evidence is here is basically that Australian rugby schools are just not as strong as Australians seem to think. Now, I want you to understand my 2018 thought process. All right, so the Sainix rep for Australia was St. Augustine. And St. Augustine at that same festival had a tight win against Exeter College 1917. Now, Exeter lost 47-10 to Hartbury, who were in my list. And St. Augustine's defeated Scots College 22-21. And Scots defeated Kings 19-10. Kings and St. Joseph's were not well beaten, but they were both beaten by Barker, and they were co-champs. So when I looked at these results, I just thought to myself, there is not one of these AAGPS New South Wales schools that I can put on my list. I just can't. Just based on this. This is how my thought process works. So based on this, I can't see any of these schools coming close to Hartbury. Aussies, who were, I think, 19 on the list or 18 on the list, had a relatively close game against Hartbury. So this is exactly why I didn't have any Australian schools on my list. And one of the things you'll say is that, the GPS schools weren't considered. And St. Joseph's Nudgee, they were unbeaten. And I considered it. But this year, the AA GPS was superior because New South Wales 1 and New South Wales 2 contested the final of the ASRU Championship. So that showed that they were the stronger league. And if they're the stronger league and I don't put any of their schools in the top 20, how the hell can I put a GPS school in the top 20? Why do I care that St. Joseph's Nudgee were unbeaten in the GPS league when the GPS league clearly wasn't as strong as a double A GPS league, and there was none of the schools there that really stood out for me. So that's why pretty much after doing some basic research, I wasn't able to put any of Australian schools on this list. Now, understand, I've got an open mind. Now, so many comments in the video that I did alluded to strong results. I've tried to respond to as many as I possibly can, and I give the same answer, guys. I say, please just send me a link. I mean, everything I've shown in this presentation, you can verify. You can Google it yourself if you don't believe me. So, if you're going to offer opinions, just provide some links or sources. Otherwise, it doesn't help anyone. I just don't think that junior level rugby in Australia is that good, and I think it's very, very far behind South Africa, New Zealand, and England. Do you want some further proof? The transition from schools rugby to under 20 rugby. Let's take a look at that. So, if you take a look at Australia under 20 playing New Zealand, South Africa, and England, basically they got a 14% win rate. A 0-5 against New Zealand, 1-2 against South Africa, and a 1-5 against England. So the transition from this is part of junior rugby. So these guys go from schools, and the talented ones from the schools level, the best of the best, end up making it to the under 20 level. Well, not really in South Africa's case, you know. We've got a few political appointments to make, so we do produce strong teams, but not our strongest teams. But yeah, look at that, 14% win rate. So the junior structures just aren't there. And if we take a look at the finishing positions over the years, basically England and New Zealand generally finish in the top two. South Africa, famous bronze medalists. I mean, take a look how many threes there are over there. But look at Australia. I mean, any time they enter the competition, they basically, on average, are not going to make the semi-finals even. It's generally South Africa, New Zealand, and England that make up the 3 of the 4 positions. Then another team, Argentina will come along, and Ireland will come along, and France will come along, but very rarely in Australia. I mean, you can see that 2009, 2010, and 2011, they made the semis at least, but after that, nothing, 0, just not strong. And just some additional points. School rugby and junior under 20 rugby are not really a reflection of long-term strength. Australia's got a limited pool of rugby players. I mean, rules and league dominate. So you've got a small pool that's cut even smaller by age group. It just means the numbers are just not there to compete with New Zealand, England, and South Africa. And Australia's done really well to compete at international level, especially because it's not a big sport in Australia. They've won 2 World Cups. It's their 3rd biggest code, you know. And they've won 2 World Cups. So I've got nothing against Australia. I think it's a fantastic rugby country. Some of my favourite players of all time come from Australia. Jason Little, Tim Horan, Michael Liner, Larkham, Gregan. I mean, I've got a lot of respect for Australian rugby, but don't come with your bullshit where you're telling me that it's even in the same hemisphere as South Africa, New Zealand, and England. Maybe you're a bit closer to England, but in terms of South African schools and New Zealand schools, it's not close. It is nowhere near close, and I've got the data that proves it. So in conclusion, firstly, understand, this is my first ever global top 20. And you must understand there are many years where I would have included Australian team, just not this year, and I think I provided sound reasoning for that. New Zealand and South Africa are the strongest structures by a long way. England, I think, are strong. And I think it's shown with the under 20 stats as well. Now, I look forward to rebuttals. I look forward to some arguments, some debate. But just please provide me with some links and some sources. I've had my say. I've done my response video. and I really, really look forward to engaging with the Australian audience and sort of getting an understanding of Australian schoolboy rugby. Because, look, the reason why myself and I think a lot of New Zealanders and a lot of South Africans in general are so passionate about schoolboy rugby is because it's still played for the love of the game. Those guys play for passion. They're not playing for money. They play for the badge. We don't see that in Curry Cup or Super Rugby or any of those competitions anymore. You know, that's the one thing rugby always had, was playing for the badge, playing for the passion. And I think we've lost that in the professional era, but we still have it with schoolboy rugby. And I can understand why you want to be proud of your rugby, and you have a right to be proud of your rugby and your school. No one's ever going to try and take that away from you. But what I am going to try and take away from you is you sending me messages telling me that I'm full of shit for not including GPS and AA GPS schools in. If you want me to include these schools, give me some bloody sound reasoning, please. So, thanks for watching, guys. Again, thanks for everyone for subscribing, helping me reach 1,000 followers. My Australian audience, please understand, I'm not trying to cause you any offense. I'm just calling the facts as I see them. And again, links and sources, not opinions. So let's start the debate process. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Don't forget to subscribe, like this video. And if you're Australian, you're probably going to dislike this video. So Kiwis and South Africans, start smashing that like button. We need to outdo the Australians, because if I was an Australian and I heard something like this, I'd also smash the dislike button down. So help a brother out. All right. Well, have a fantastic week, guys, and catch you in the next video.